Good evening, folks, and welcome to the live stream. I hope you're all very well this evening. Let's see who we have on tonight. We have Jared Mack. Great to see you, Jared Mack. Hope you're well. Freckle Punny is here. Great to see you. Richard James is on. Colin is here. Great to see you. Don Donovan is on. Great to have you on. We have Liam. Great to see you. Ted Boy 1. Great to have you on. Stefan is on. Great to see you. Ava is here. Great to have you on too. Who else have we got? Viking King of President Stu of Stewland. Great to see you. AMAC C is on. Great to have you on. Raven 1983 Witch is here. Great to see you. Who else have we got? We have John O'Sullivan. Great to see you, John. Liam Vickerman is on. Great to see you. We also have David McGuinness. Thanks so much for coming on, David. Hope you're well up there in Scotland. Make sure to check out Indie Truck Davies, the Two Davies YouTube channel. Chatty Rat is here. Great to see you, Chatty Rat. Hope you're well. Young Ralph is on. Great to see you. Woods by Me is here. Great to see you. Killer is on, I see. Thanks for moderating tonight, Killer. Timmy Bing is on. Great to see you. Who else have we got? We have Roseanne. Great to see you, Roseanne. Roisin is here too. N. Martin. Great to have you on. We have also Eddie. Great to see you, Eddie. Daily Blase, great to have you on. Hope you're well. We also have, excuse me, 91 Leads is here. Reagan Elite, thanks so much for coming on, Reagan Elite. And thanks for sharing the stream on Twitter. We also have, that's it, is it? No, there are more coming on. Mark Teffler is here. Mark Teffler, great to see you. We also have you, great to see you. Mark, we have another Mark. We have Derek, Gareth, and so many more. CGM is here and so many more. Hope you're all very well. Sir Larry the Cat is here too. Great to see you. Hope you all had a very nice week and you're ready for another weekend of madness. But before we jump into a weekend of madness, there's also some madness online. Lawrence Fox, who was recently cancelled or suspended from GB News, is not taking it very well. He posted this on Twitter and it was shared by my friend Miffy on Twitter, who says, "Stunning and brave. The home of cancel culture pins a tweet celebrating cancel culture. Who runs a business which loses who runs this business which loses £30 million a year? It's embarrassing." So he's taking that cancellation of his contract quite in a mature manner. Kevin, thanks so much for that super chat. Hey you to you too. Thanks for that. So it's good to see Lawrence Fox taking it in a very adult way. And it seems another was a Dan Watton was let go, and Calvin something, who pretends to be a priest, he was let go as well. So it's interesting because Peter Jukes, who I met just over a year ago when I appeared on Byline TV, really nice guy, Peter Jukes. He's the head of that. He predicted recently that there may be more in the pipeline when it comes to GB News, and it's looking more and more likely that it's going to collapse because the rot has set in. I don't know how they're going to come back from this, because unless they're just going to replace these people, unless they start to produce more mainstream content and not conspiracy theory content or this woke crap, anti-woke crap that they try to peddle. Unless they try and be more mature, maybe that's a way of getting around this problem, but we will have to wait and see. So it's quite interesting and quite entertaining to see the whole thing collapse. Anyway, moving on. Before we get on to the main show, we'll talk of course about the Tories and taxes, the winter allowance being cut, some Labour policies, and of course immigration. And also want to talk about what I think Elon Musk might be up to. But I wanted to show you this clip. Wales speed limit. Okay, that's a big story at the moment, something that the Tories actually backed recently, but now they're against it. The Tories are for something and then against it, or then against something and then for it. It depends. It depends on which way the Labour Party are going. So whatever the Labour Party present, the Tories are against it. Even if it's free school meals, the Tories are against it. But you'd find some Tories were for something, and then they realise, oh, the party is against it, now I'm against it too. But anyway, Wales speed limit. Andrew Griffin, MP, mistakenly calls Wales a province. If this loads.
Well, a blanket measure is rarely a good idea. So if that's something like we've seen in Wales, where vast parts of that province have had arbitrary speed limits imposed on them.
Like, this is supposed to be, and I have this as a Fool of the Week, okay, just a spoiler, Fool of the Week, Andrew Griffin. But, they're supposed to be the Conservative and Unionist Party. And they're treating Wales as a province. Like, I know some Tory MPs treat Scotland as a county, and Jacob Rees-Mogg recently criticised the use of foreign languages in the House of Commons. And when he was responding to foreign languages, he was referring to Gaelic, he was referring to Welsh, he was referring to Scots, referring to these as foreign languages that they shouldn't be used, or the use of foreign languages in the House of Commons should be extremely limited. Apart from himself, who throws out Latin, and Boris Johnson, of course, who threw out Latin almost every week. A bit of Latin just to maintain the visage of being an upper class twat or whatever. But let's get back to this. So Wales is a province. A province of what? Of where? Well, we would have to assume it's a province of England. And as I mentioned in the video see tomorrow, there was Ian Bolton, the Brexiteer, who was sent to the House of Lords because he's a Brexiteer. Remember the former cricket player Ian Bolton, Sir Ian Bolton, isn't that his name now? He famously or infamously said something like, yeah, well, the reason England left the European Union, or now that we're out, England can succeed. Now that England left the European Union, or England voted out. Of course, what he was referring to was Britain, but he called it England. England will succeed. England doesn't want to rejoin the European Union or something like that. I don't remember the exact phrase. I'll have to look it up. But it was, of course, this little England mentality of England is when they're talking about the United Kingdom, they say England. But of course, what does that mean for people in Scotland? What does that mean for people in Wales? What does that mean for people in Northern Ireland? I would love to, if I was in the UK now, I would love to meet with some Conservative Party members. Wouldn't actually have to be MPs, but you could try it with MPs. Show them a map of Ireland without the border and ask them to draw the border. I know they've asked people on the street before, but these are members of the public and we're not expecting them. But you would imagine members of the Conservative and Unionist Party should know where the border between Northern Ireland and the Republic is. But I think a lot of them would have problems drawing the border. So-called broad shoulders of UK, floppy blobby. Floppy blobby. Thanks, Alexis. Yes, it's a union of equals, a union of provinces. But once again, a province of where? This isn't a slip of the tongue, because he obviously must know that Wales is not a province. Like, why would you go to province? You could say, if you wanted to say, okay, region, that wouldn't be as good, but it wouldn't be as bad. But, if you said a region, but to call Wales a province, well, then it's a province of what? Because then then you'd have to say England is a province, and Scotland is a province, and Northern Ireland is a province. A province of what? Of the United Kingdom. But then you couldn't say England is a province of the United Kingdom. Everything bad is British, but everything good is English. I think it's the same thing when it comes to the Scots. When the Scots win, it's the British team. When the Scots lose, it's the Scottish team. That's how the BBC normally present it. Anyway, let's move on. Sunak can expect to limit powers of councils in England to curb car use. Oh, God. It's a bit like, you know, when Thatcher sold off council houses and then refused to allow councils to build new houses. Rishi Sunak is to prioritise the interest of millions of car owners with a series of measures that will provoke environmentalists and curb the power of local councils. In a package expected to be announced at the Tory conference on Monday, the Prime Minister will set out his plan for motorists that will limit the number of 20-mile-per-hour speed restrictions and favour drivers over bus passengers. It's like the desperation here. Like, okay, we need to encourage anyone to come out and vote for us. Okay, let's look at motorists. Yeah, if we limit the number of places where 20-mile-an-hour speed limits can be put in, that will help us with that voting bloc. It's not even a voting bloc. Motorists are not a voting bloc. I don't know why he's trying to pander to them. Like people who are motorists, generally, I think if you were to ask them, what are your priorities? It wouldn't be, well, looking after motorists. It would be cost of living, the NHS, education, you know, crumbling schools, crumbling infrastructure. They would be their priorities, even if they are motorists. He's not going to win these people over by saying, look, I'm pandering to you as a motorist to vote Tory. Next week, Sunak announced his contract to build 500 new helipads to be delivered by a firm Sunak's wife has shared. Well said, Brad. How did you know? Brad has his finger on the pulse. He knows exactly what's happening. Yes, a helipad for everyone, and Rishi Sunak's father-in-law will be given the contract. I said this before. I think I'm convinced Rishi Sunak is in power solely to enrich his family. That's it. It's not to help people. It's not to grow the economy. It's not to stop the boats. It's not. All of those things are a vehicle for him to stay in power. But the reason he's there, I think, is to enrich his family, to give them contracts, to protect them, to protect their interests. Not to protect them, but protect their interests. And of course, Rishi Sunak's wife's interests are Rishi Sunak's interests. He benefits from them as well. Yeah, he should actually have to distance himself from his interests. You know, he shouldn't have conflicts of interest. These are clear conflicts of interest. But, you know, I'm not expecting politicians to be poor, but you would imagine it wouldn't it be better if politicians were regular people, not quasi-billionaires who have interests in, you know, international business and making sure that contracts are given to people within their family or you know, in an indirect way for them to benefit. It's a type of tin pot dictatorship sort of thing. It's a sort of thing you'd see in Libya when Muammar Gaddafi was in charge. You know, giving out contracts to my family or my relatives, this sort of thing. You don't see anything really different there. Thanks, Brad. Anyway, it goes on to say he has also raised the prospect of paring back the hugely over-budgeted HS2 rail line, though he refused to provide clarity on his plans on Thursday. Yeah, he's dancing around this idea that, well, he's going to cut funding for HS2. But if he does, then he's going to leave Manchester and Birmingham, you know, relying on old infrastructure. You know, the whole goal of HS2 when it was first conceived was that it would create a direct link between a high-speed rail link between Manchester and Paris. So you could actually get on a train in Manchester and travel all the way to Paris in a few hours. That was the original idea. But of course, Brexit came along, and the Brexiteers said, we don't want anything to do with France anymore, unless we want them to hold immigrants who want our asylum seekers from crossing the channel. That's the only interactions we want with France, to put pressure on them to stop asylum seekers from crossing the channel. Anyway, the plan for motorists is expected to include moves to limit English council's powers to place 20 mile an hour speed limits on main roads, and to restrict the number of hours a day that car traffic is banned from bus lanes. Okay. But this thing about 20 miles an hour, like if there's a lot of traffic, you're going to be traveling less than 20 miles an hour. But what is the 20 mile an hour limit for? It's to protect pedestrians, to protect people on the road, people crossing the road or people walking along the road. It's about protecting those people. In the same way as the ULEZ is there to protect public health. And the Tories are against both of these. Like, they claim that they care about the public, but not if it comes to allowing people to drive fast and potentially kill people, or to reduce, toxic fumes and air pollution, to protect people, especially the young, the very young, and the very old or the vulnerable. Frecklepony, thanks so much for that super chat. Sonic, superficial, underhand, narcissistic, antidemocratic, cretin. I should say it again. Sonic, superficial, underhand, narcissistic, antidemocratic cretin. Well said. That's him to a T. Thanks so much, Frecklepony. Zunik also is expected to cite concerns about so-called 15-minute cities, an urban planning concept based around having shops and workplaces near homes, which some protesters claim is a UN-led conspiracy to limit people's ability to travel. You know what we used to call 15-minute cities? Villages, where, you would have everything within 15 minutes of you, even 5 minutes of you. Why is this a bad idea? Why is it a bad idea to have everything you need? Pharmacy, supermarket, GP, bar, restaurant. All of these things are within 15 minutes of walk. Isn't that a good thing? You don't have to use your car. That's the problem. We don't want people to use their cars less. And of course, buying into this is really worrying because it's a conspiracy. It's a conspiracy theory, this idea that it's about limiting people's ability. People will not be allowed to leave their homes. This is the idea. It's a sort of, tinfoil hat. What's that guy in the US, the crazy guy who was being sued? That sort of mentality. And the Tories are buying into that. I was really concerned about some of the rhetoric that Suella Braverman was using last week, or it was earlier this week, when she was in the US, and she was talking about, the native population in Britain being replaced. This is the sort of conspiracies that racists, and we're talking about full-on racists, neo-Nazis, like those types of people have been using. And she was buying into that, or she was selling that. And if Rishi Sunak is going to be selling this idea that 15-minute cities are a problem, it's about limiting people's freedoms. This is insane. Everything that comes out that's a benefit for people, you'll always find somebody who believes it's some sort of conspiracy. That Alex Jones, thanks so much, guys. Alex Jones, the crazy guy in the US. Yeah, I should have been a bit more specific. Thanks, Mark. Yeah, Alex Jones. It's bad, Max, if you burn no fossil fuels. Yes, well said, Chris. We need to do more fossil fuel burning. Keep the the oil fires burning. You don't want clean air. That's terrible. It's a terrible idea. Anyway, Rishi Sunak and Boris Johnson have overseen the largest set of tax rises since Second World War, according to Economic Analysis. The Institute for Fiscal Studies, the IFS, estimates that by the time of the next general election, the tax burden will have risen to around 37% of national income. This equates to roughly £3,500 extra per household, although the increase is not shared evenly. Of course it's not shared evenly. The richest in society pay less. And this is based on income, on wages. So, on national, we're talking about wages. But if you have income from investments, for example, then you're okay. Records began in the 1950s for the figures, but no parliament has seen a larger hike. The headroom for tax cuts has suffered as interest rates rose and the cost of servicing debt has risen. High inflation has led the government to be cautious of cutting taxes and leaving people with more money to spend. You need people to spend money in a difficult time like this. You need to give people money. Like a UBI, for example. Treasury Minister Andrew Giffen, Andrew Giffen told Sky News the government still believes in reducing the tax burden, but their priority is bringing down inflation. But rising wages is not feeding into inflation. If it did, then why was inflation above 10% last year and wages were stagnant? Asked if we can expect some tax cuts before the next general election, he said, no, that's absolutely not. What I'm saying is I think any responsible Treasury Minister wouldn't come on your programme this morning and make specific commitments. Labour also refused to commit to tax cuts if it wins the next general election, blaming the Tories for crashing the economy. What about tax cuts for the poorest in society? But then the poorest, we're not talking about tax cuts for them, because when we're talking about tax cuts, it's always for the richest. When politicians talk about tax cuts, it's for the people who at the upper end of the economic scale. It's not generally tax cuts because if you're on low wages, a tax cut isn't really going to help you. Like if the government say, we're going to give you an extra £2 a week in tax cuts. Wow, that's great. But inflation is running at £3 a week extra. So, everything is £3 a week more expensive. Not a week, but a year, sorry. £3 a year more expensive than last year. But my pay increase is £2 a year extra. That's not really going to help me. But if you're on a massive income and, a lot of the money you receive is from investments, then you're better off if there's a tax cut. Tax the rich for a change, just an idea. Yes. The rich pay £100,000 to an accountant to avoid paying $1 million in tax. Well said. Well said, Shell. That's how it works. If you're rich, you can afford very expensive accountants. It's like, if you're very rich, you can afford very expensive lawyers, and you can get out of problems that ordinary people can't get out of. I always find it funny when you hear about some celebrity who has agreed with the revenue commissioners or the Inland Revenue. They have come to an agreement to pay a certain amount of tax. It doesn't work for normal people. Even if you have a small business, if you have a small business, you don't come to an agreement with the tax man or tax woman. No, you end up paying. If you don't, you end up receiving penalties, and if you don't pay, then you'll end up in jail probably, or you'll end up losing your house or whatever. But if you're a multimillionaire, if you're a celebrity, if you're a very powerful business person, and you have problems with your taxes, well, you can negotiate how much to pay. Isn't that insane? A windfall tax, that would be good. How many times do we have to say it? Tax the rich. You tax people who have the money. There's no point. This is something it's easier to go after people who have no power. It's difficult to go after people who have a lot of power, people who can afford expensive accountants and expensive lawyers. So you get more money out of the rich. You get very little out of, pursuing taxes on the poor. Like when it comes to universal credit, the Department of Work and Pensions will sanction people for missing an interview or missing a phone call. But, if you're a multimillionaire, you can avoid paying taxes, and there are a massive number of loopholes that you can avail of. Is the government closing those loopholes? No, because it doesn't really doesn't work in their favour. Who goes to jail for not paying tax? No, I was wrong. Nobody goes to jail for not, but you can lose everything, and you could lose your home if you don't pay your taxes. As Mark Twain said, the certainty of death and taxes. Anyway, moving on from that. As the Tories don't want to help poor people, help rich people. Here's another example of them not helping the most vulnerable in society. Garrett, thanks so much for that comment. Can you imagine getting a parking fine, Max? Just ring up the company and say, like, right, brov, you want 500 quid, I'll give you 50p. What you saying? Yes. If you're really rich and it was like £5,000 or £50,000, maybe you can negotiate, but no. If you're, that'd be a pretty bad parking fine anyway, 500 quid. Don't know where you'd be parking to get that. But yeah, if you're rich, you can negotiate. If you're poor, you just have to take your punishment. Scrapping winter fuel allowance for most pensioners to pay for triple lock, not happening. So number 10 has said scrapping the winter allowance for all but the poorest pensioners is now not happening. Early on Friday, Sky News revealed the option was under live discussion between number 10, the Treasury, and the Department of Work and Pensions as a way to claw back some taxpayer funds from the elderly. Let's go after the elderly for, let's hang them upside down, shake them and see what change falls out. The Prime Minister is expecting to fight the next general election on a pledge to keep the pension triple lock despite its spiralling costs, and has been looking at various options to cut back welfare spending as he looks to pave a way for pre-election tax cuts, while also remaining committed to the pension triple lock at the next general election. This doesn't make a lot of sense, does it? So he's talking about tax cuts, obviously for the rich, and also maintaining the triple lock. The triple lock meaning that pensions basically rise with inflation, and if inflation is very low, then another measure kicks in to make sure that the pensioners are looked after. So you're going to cut welfare spending and protect and bring in pre-tax bring in tax cuts for the tax cuts for the rich. We have welfare cut back on welfare spending and protecting the triple lock. Okay, I don't see how that's all going to work. One government figure told Sky News that while the option was part of conversations about how to find savings in the welfare bill, number 10 didn't want to risk public speculation on such an emotive issue and that has divided views across Whitehall. I think this is once again another kite flying exercise by the Tories. Put out the idea that we're going to, for example, end the winter allowance. What's the feedback? What's the feedback from the public? Are they willing to tolerate it? If enough of them are, then we'll go with it. If that's not the case, then we're not going to go with it. Mr. Sunak was interested in the option, while the Chancellor and the Work and Pensions Secretary, Mel Stride, were less enthusiastic about means-tested pension benefits, according to one person familiar with the discussions. One source told Sky News number 10 believes the officials at DWP or the Treasury leaked conversations about the winter fuel allowance in order to kill it off. That's interesting. So it could be a case of, I like Max's use of the word tribble. Tribble. And was it in Star Trek, the tribbles, or the little furry things that clogged up the air vents or something like that? So it seems that perhaps the DWP and the Treasury wanted to kill off this by leaking it to the media. I don't think that's the case. I think it's a case of another kite flying exercise, maybe more by number 10 than the government themselves. That's how they operate. Mr. Sunak has so far refused to commit to honouring the triple lock, which increases pensions each year by whatever is the highest out of the average earnings, inflation, or 2.5%. However, insiders said that it is inevitable that he will and is now trying to find other ways to offset the cost of the commitment, with the triple lock forecast to cost as much as $45 billion by the year 2050. Well, Rishi Sunak doesn't have to care about 2050. He doesn't even have to care about 2024. Winter fuel payments go up by about 8.4 million households, and is forecasted to cost $2 billion this year, according to the Institute of Fiscal Studies. A small and falling proportion are in receipt of pension credit. What is the winter fuel allowance? The winter fuel payment is a tax-free handout from the government to help people of pension age pay for their fuel and heating bills. Ministers set a date each year that defines eligibility from 2023-24. Anyone born before the 25th of September 1957 could get between £250 and £600 to help pay the bills this winter. It should be for everyone. I think it'd actually be cheaper to administer if you just give it to everyone. The exact amount depends on things like age and whether the other person in their households also qualify. However, it does not take into account the financial status, meaning even the wealthiest pensioners can receive the state benefit. Pensioners can opt out of receiving the payments, but last year the numbers doing so dropped. Yes, because prices had gone up. Charity said this showed that even middle-class retirees were struggling with rising energy bills. Wealthy celebrities like Sir Alan Sugar have also complained about the difficulties in opting out and donating their allowance instead. Some MPs have previously called for a means-tested system, but the idea has not become mainstream. Now, a means-tested system means that you're going to have a bureaucracy and it's going to become more expensive. It would actually be easier just to make it available to everyone and then allow people to opt out or to donate their share to charity. I think that would be a good idea. Not a huge fan of Alan Sugar, but he's right here. Garrett, thanks so much for that super chat. Means-tested pensioner benefits, are they real? It's it's like the Tories are just about, I don't know what they're hoping to achieve by any of this. They rely on the elderly to vote for them, but at times they punish the elderly more than they punish anyone else. I think it's they believe that they can push older people to the limit, and as long as they don't go over that limit, they come out and they'll vote Tory anyway. Not all, of course, but a significant number. But this demographic is disappearing and it's being replaced. And generally in the past, what happened was young people would be left-wing, would vote for left-wing parties, or they would vote generally, or they wouldn't vote at all, but they'd be more left-wing. And as people got older, they got on this property ladder. They became more right-wing, and they supported policies to maintain their wealth. So they built up wealth, and they wanted parties and governments to protect that wealth. So they would vote more conservative, more right-wing parties. That seems to be changing now. There was a sort of cut-off period where people would actually become more conservative. That is no longer the case. And if we're looking at new generations like Generation Z and Zoomers? Zoomies? Zoomies are different things. What was it? Generation Z and Millennials. I think it began with Millennials. Millennials are becoming more conservative, but it's much later in life and with this much smaller number. And when it comes to Generation Z, they're becoming very, very few of them are becoming conservative. Alan Sugar, Poundland Trump type. Yes, the ironic thing about Alan Sugar was he was a Remainer, but maybe it's because he wanted to protect his investments. Not all Remainers are good guys. We must remember that. Being a Remainer doesn't make you a good guy. Guys, we're about halfway through the stream, so I just want to take a short comedy moment, and then we'll be back in just a jiffy with more serious stuff.
Colin from Portsmouth is on the line. Hello, Colin.
It's got to the point, right? It's got to the point where you can't even be racist without being called a racist.
But you're the least racist person you know, Colin.
And I never once and never will be racist. I'd like the freedom to be racist, if I want to be, without being called a racist.
Well, it's the woke agenda, isn't it, Colin? Using accurate terms to describe people with. It should be banned.
It's what everyone everyone's thinking, though, innit? Silently.
Everyone's silently thinking racist things, are they? Silently? How do you know they are if they're being silent? Are you silently racist, Colin?
Well, I'm never quiet, so you can't accuse me of being silent. And if I did say I was silently racist, then you'd arrest me for being a racist.
So that makes you, Colin, one of the 0.1% of the population who are neither vocally nor silently racist.
And proud of it. But if I changed that and did the opposite, people like you shouldn't be allowed to call me one. Anyway, mate, thanks for having me on. Love to the family.
Love to the family, Colin.
Stop trying to silence me.
Oh, yes. Oh, Colin. I'd love to meet him someday. He seems like a very pleasant guy. Labour would stick to Tory spending plans for frontbenchers suggest as Keir Starmer eyes milestone by election win. Okay, so it says here so Labour frontbenchers suggest party would stick to government spending plans. Oh my goodness. You know, you're supposed to be creating, you know, a gulf between you and the Tories, but it seems that the Labour Party just want to follow some of the Tories. Like, okay, well, let's get into this. Here's another interesting moment from our conversation with Labour's Darren Jones in the last hour. Darren Jones, I'm a huge fan of Darren Jones when he's in the select committees. But when he's been interviewed about certain topics, the shine comes off somewhat. He was asked if Labour would make tax cuts. If Labour would make tax cuts should they come to power. However, he appeared to suggest that the party would stick to the current government spending plans. Why? The party shadow chief secretary to the Treasury said, if Labour wins the next election, which I obviously hope that we do, we will inherit the status quo. The money coming in, the money going out, the cost of having to run the public services in the state that they're in. Yes, that will be, okay, that's true. As soon as you take over, you're going to have, you're going to have a disaster and you're going to have to muddle through. But you would be hoping that, okay, immediately you would start making some changes. We're going to have to keep the show on the road while trying to come forward with big reforms to fix the country and get Britain working again. Of course, we would love to reduce people's taxes in the medium term because they are the highest that they have been for a long period of time. But we're going to have to fix the country first. So there will be no tax. They're not going to touch taxes. But we would love to reduce people's taxes. People's taxes is not the concern. Public services is the concern. The cost of living is a concern. Taxes. The reason people are suffering from a cost of living crisis is not because of taxes. It's because of inflation. It's because of cuts to public services, where if people are not able to access GP services, they'll go to, if they can't access the NHS, they'll go to a private hospital or whatever. They'll go, use the private sector. Really, this is concerning because you don't want to be telling the public we're actually just going to maintain the status quo for the time being. Now, this could be the Labour Party setting the bar really low and saying, look, don't expect anything radical from us. We're not the Tories, okay? We're not Boris Johnson. We're not Rishi Sunak. We're not Suella Braverman. But vote for us anyway. Because we're slightly different. We're not as bad as them. Like we're going to follow through on many of their policies. We're going to maintain those policies, but we're not racist. Okay. I hear Labour councillors cut services in Scotland. Darren Jones was bloody terrible when interviewed by Victoria Derbyshire on Sunday. I didn't see that. I should have seen that, but I didn't see that interview. That was just about the Starmer. Yes, this is about the by-election win. Starmer aims for a milestone by-election win in Scotland. Labour are targeting an historic victory in Scotland. Scotland's first recall by-election next week. This is going to be interesting. With leader Sir Keir Starmer saying a win could be a milestone on his party's journey back to power. So Keir was speaking as he campaigned ahead of the Rutherglen and Hamilton West vote next Thursday. Margaret Ferrier won the seat for the SNP in 2019, but was suspended from the party the following year after breaching COVID-19 lockdown rules. A subsequent parliamentary suspension forced a recall petition, which has resulted in the by-election on the 5th of October. Campaigning with candidate Michael Shanks and Scottish Labour leader Anna Sanwar in Hamilton on Friday, Sir Keir said the party was in good place to win. He added that the Tories will go down in the general election expected next year, while victory in Rutherglen and Hamilton West will be a milestone on the hard road back for Labour to power. Sir Keir expressed the by-election, which the first spark for the recall in Scotland, is very important to Labour. That is why we're running a strong positive campaign, he said. We know we have to earn every vote. Now, I don't know this constituency very well. Shanks Awan. Okay. Not Awan. I hear Starmer was up in Scotland. I didn't know he was up in Scotland, so it seems he's trying to promote the Labour candidate there for that by-election. I don't know the polling, so I don't know if it's... See, the thing is, the previous SNP candidate obviously is not running, so it's going to be a different SNP candidate running. So it's some of this could come down to tactical voting, where unfortunately, and we've seen this before, where Labour and the Conservatives work together to keep the SNP out. Now this could... So if this happens, so if Labour win the seat, it could be seen as a massive victory for Labour, but if there's tactical voting involved, it may not be a massive victory, because it would not be something that you could emulate in the general election. While if the SNP hold on to the seat, then this would of course be a very bad result for the Labour Party. Guys, I just have a small technical problem. I'll be back in just a second. Bear with me for just a moment. Okay, sorry about that. So, okay, well, let's move on. So, sticking with Labour and their policies for a moment.
Keir Starmer has zero credibility with anyone.
But right now, I mean, Keir Starmer's way ahead in the polls. It does look like he's going to be the next Prime Minister as things stand. So does it really matter whether you find him trustworthy or credible or whatever? He's probably going to be in power, isn't he?
No, but you see, it doesn't matter whether he becomes Prime Minister or not, because he's going... I mean, I was...
He's not going to have power anyway, is what
He's
you're
not
saying.
going to have power. He doesn't have a spine either. So Sunak is spineless. Look at HS2. I mean, it is pathetic now that they're talking about stopping it at Birmingham. Next week, they will stop it at Watford, right? You might as well not do it if you're not going to do it. And so he's spineless. He's crumbling under the pressure, the budget pressure. But so is Keir Starmer. If you can't come up with credible policies that you will stick to, unless something cataclysmic takes place, then it really doesn't matter whether Sunak or Keir Starmer is in power. I mean, this is the greatest defeat of democracy. It doesn't matter whether Sunak or Starmer is in power.
Then who is in power? That's the main question. Like if it doesn't matter if Starmer is in power, it doesn't matter if Sunak... See, the problem for Sunak is that he's weak when it comes to maintaining control over his MPs and his ministers. But if we're talking about Keir Starmer, well, then why is he weak? Is it because of interests? Is it because he doesn't have support of the party members? The party membership maybe is not supportive of Keir Starmer. I think they're going to get behind him in the first maybe 100 days. Like, I think he's going to have a boost in the first 100 days when he's Prime Minister. But of course, support for Prime Ministers normally drops after that. And it's possible that Starmer could serve as just as Prime Minister for one session of Parliament. He could be Prime Minister just for one term, he could be replaced after that. He doesn't have a lot of charisma. So I don't think he's able to maneuver the party in a way that behind him, because he's saying there is no alternative. And look at what happened in 2019. So he's able to, and he's pushed out certain, the left wing of the party, and moved the party more to the centre. Now he's explained, well, I had to do that because otherwise we're going to lose elections. We lost in 2017, we lost in 2019. This is Starmer's words. These are Starmer's ideas, not mine. But this is what's happened. We need to move to the centre. We need to present ourselves as a party that is pro-business, that a party is less radical, and that's going to win votes. And I think the main problem here is not so much that people are going, and I've said this before, and I always say this, you don't vote for the party in opposition. You vote for or you vote against the incumbent. So this will be a vote against the Tories or for the Tories, and fewer people want to vote for the Tories. And there's a huge risk with that, is because when you take power, okay, then now you are the incumbent. And then at the next election, people are going to vote on what you have achieved. And if Starmer is just going to roll along with the sort of policies that the Tories have been implementing and say, well, we're not going to really rock the boat, we're just going to maintain the current trajectory, then you're going to fail. You're going to be replaced, either by somebody within the party who's more radical or by the opposition. And, the Tories are going to get trashed at the next election, but there is always a risk that they could come back after that if the Labour Party fail. Alistair, thanks so much for that super chat. Max, letter to presiding officer about lies. Poverty pay said in last week's First Minister's questions. Labour lied, lying to people in the by-election about 20% council tax increase. That's a consolation. Yeah, so I heard something about that where they've been in the First Minister's questions, we're talking about increasing council tax. And of course, if Labour are running against the SNP, they're going to use whatever dirty tricks they can against the SNP. In the same way, they're going to use similar tactics against the Conservatives. We've seen some of that already when it came to some of the things that the Labour Party were using against Rishi Sunak, which were quite dirty. They were effective, but they were very dirty tricks. And of course, if they see them succeeding in London, in England, in Westminster, they're going to use them in Scotland as well. I think this idea that Labour are a left-wing party or centre-left party, and the SNP are a left-wing party or a progressive party, and they should work together or they should help each other out. No, not in Scotland. It doesn't really work like that. Thanks, Alistair. Hung Parliament calling it now. It's possible they'll end up being. It depends, of course, on turnout. If turnout is really low, you could end up with a hung Parliament, and that would be a disaster. Well, it'd be a disaster for the leadership of the Labour Party, and it could actually result in Starmer losing his position. If it resulted in Labour and the Lib Dems working together, or the Greens or the SNP, but I don't see that happening, but a coalition government with Labour and the Lib Dems, that's possible. But it would mean that Starmer would be in a weaker position. And I think if Starmer doesn't win a massive majority, he could be replaced within 6 months. I don't see him lasting very long, because he would be extremely wounded. and he'd be limping on. He's leading in the polls. People are expecting a huge, massive swing to the Labour Party. We've seen that in some of the by-elections, but that generally isn't emulated, isn't replicated, in the general election, because people vote for different things. Also, how the turnout is different. What people vote for in local elections is different to the general, and of course, when you're taking local elections as a whole, not every constituency is holding a local election, so you can't really use it as a barometer. PR more likely with a hung parliament. Yes, if there is a hung parliament, it's more likely that the Lib Dems will be able to push Labour to support proportional representation. It has to happen. I would really like to see it happen.
A very good morning.
Under Labour Labour leadership, or yes, there's. Unfortunately, I hope it's not. I was hoping it wouldn't be picked up too much in the on the audio, but unfortunately my dog is barking at something. So
to you, Darren Jones, thanks for talking to us. First of all, your reflections on that revised GDP figure. Good news for the economy.
Well, I mean, we have this conversation every few weeks, I think, where a 0.1% change in economic growth is reported, and I'm happy to take a 0.1% increase in economic growth, but it needs to be much more than that. Not least because the price of the things that we pay for, the cost of living crisis, is still a real issue for people. And when you compare the UK to other major economies, we still have some of the lowest growth across those G7 major economies. So there's more to be done.
And I also want to ask you about the IFS, the Institute for Fiscal Studies report out this morning, which says that the government is on course to oversee the biggest tax-raising parliament since records began. What do you make of that?
Well, I mean, it's not a surprise to anyone because we've all been experiencing these constant Tory tax rises over many, many years. And the big question that I and many people ask is, well, what are we getting for our money? I mean, we've been increasing the amount of taxes, the Tories have been increasing the amount of taxes people pay. We've been paying those extra taxes. And when we look around us, everything seems to be broken. We've got buildings falling down, backlogs in the national health system, the economy either at no growth or low growth, people struggling to be paid enough in order to pay the bills at home. You've really got to start to ask the question, what is it the Tories are doing with our money?
The government says that the Chancellor wants to lower the tax burden, but that sound money must come first. So will people's taxes go down under a Labour government?
Well, can I just say, I mean, sound economics must come first. I mean, really.
Okay, I understand what he's trying to say here. Sound economics must come first. And this is, it's a good rallying cry for the Labour Party. But unfortunately, you need to convince people to come out and vote for you. You need to promise them something. You can't say, look, we're going to, we need to fix the economy first. We need to be the adults in the room. People are not going to vote for that. But maybe they're relying on people not voting for that. They're just relying on people to turn out and say, we don't like the Tories. We don't like Rishi Sunak. And that's why we're going to vote for the Labour Party. It's a sort of default. We're for good things, not for bad things. It sort of reminds me of Hillary Clinton, I think it was. Was it Hillary Clinton?
I feel...
So I want to move on to immigration now. But Hillary Clinton, back in 2016, when she was like, 9/11. And people, 9/11. 9/11. It was like when... was it the former mayor of, was it Rudy Giuliani, just kept repeating 9/11, 9/11. I was mayor of New York and 9/11, 9/11, and he just kept repeating this, and people were like, okay, yeah, we understand that. We knew that you were the mayor, and that was great at the time, but like you can't just keep trying to use this vehicle for you to get into power.
Less safe in Britain because we don't have control of our borders. I feel unsafe because we have illegal immigrants coming in. The history of them, we do not know, but a lot of them get involved in drug gangs and other illegal...
No, they do not. So this is Tim Montgomery, founder of Conservative Home. So Conservative Home has a massive influence on the Conservative Party's thinking and of course, their policies. senior contributor to Times Radio and Talk TV. Right. So what he's just said here, the idea that immigrants, a lot of them get involved in crime. No, that's not the case. It's actually the opposite, because people who arrive in the country who are afraid that they may be deported are less likely to get involved in crime. Now, some people may end up being forced into crime because they can't live, because they can't work, they can't, when you arrive as an asylum seeker, you're given a certain amount of money. You're not allowed to work. You're not allowed to contribute, but you may want to. You may want to either because you want to top up your income because you don't have enough to live off, or because you want to, you don't want to be sitting around all day doing nothing. You want to maybe get a career, or you want to improve your skills, or you just want to do something. And of course, you're not allowed to do that, especially at a time when there's a shortage of workers. Oh God, I hate these Tories.
Activities when they are here. And a lot of people will be wondering about the courts and saying, you seem very interested in the welfare of migrants, and that is proper, but where is your interest in the welfare of the British people? And I think...
you're from conservative home and you're concerned about the welfare of British people. How come you've suddenly woken up after 13 years of austerity, cuts to public services, the grinding down of the NHS, and now you're saying, what about the British people? Really? Have you been living under a rock? Have you been in a coma for the last 13 years?
It raises big questions, really, about the power of the courts in our country when they can consistently undermine the democratically elected representatives of this country.
They're not undermining the democratically elected members of the United Kingdom. They're implementing the legislation that was created in Parliament. If it's breaking the law, or if it's breaking international law, then they will call it out. They will do something about it. They will resist it. So you can't break these laws. The government isn't in the power of saying, well, this is what we want you to do. No, dictatorships are where the government decide what judges say and how they rule in cases. You don't want that, do you?
In America, they have a system whereby the people who are appointed to courts have become politicised.
Well,
and that is the danger that court decisions like those of today are exposing us to. The only way of dealing with it may be for us to go, which I would not want ideally to choose, to go down the American road of having to politicise our court appointments, because that's the only way the democracies get the upper hand.
No. You don't want politically appointed judges. You don't want people running. Can you imagine? And this is what happens in the United States. There's chief of police is an elected, I believe it's chief of police, is somebody who's elected by the people. It's a political there's a political campaign to become chief of police or to become a judge. You don't want something like that. You want them to be neutral. You want them to be critical, to say, to be on the side of the law, not on the side of the politicians or on the side of a political party.
The court was at pains today to point out that it wasn't making a moral judgment on the policy one way or the other. It was just saying it's not lawful.
They say whether it's legal or not, whether the government can do this, if it's respecting international law or not. Oh my God. Sticking with immigration to a certain extent here as well.
Now, Gordon Brown once slipped over his words in the House of Commons and claimed he'd save the world during the financial crisis, remember that. But now, 13 years after leaving office, he's still as driven by a need to solve the world's problems. He's co-written a book called Permacrisis, which identifies a series of problems facing the world and some possible solutions. I've been speaking to him about that, but as you'll see, we had a pretty wide-ranging interview from Net Zero and to Oliver Braverman to HS2 and GB News.
By permacrisis, we mean you just look around the world. You've had a COVID crisis, a climate crisis, you've got debt, recessions, you've got wars. And I wanted, and the other authors, Mohammed El-Arian and Michael Spence, we wanted to give people hope that things can be done, that things can change, that things can get better, and that the desolation and desperation at the moment can pass if we do the right things. But yes, what's changed in the last 10 years, maybe even in the last 5 years, is that we're now dealing with not just common problems or shared problems, we're dealing with global problems that cannot be solved. Climate change, infectious diseases, financial stability, they cannot be solved without coordinated global action. And what's really sad is that the gap, if you like, between the need for that action and people's willingness to do it is so big, probably bigger than at any time since 1945. So what we're suggesting is, look, here are positive solutions to some of the problems, but you need to get together to actually make them work.
Today, Rishi Sunak has given the green light to one of the largest untapped oil and gas fields, Rosebank. Is that something you support?
Well, I think what you've got to think of is, are you going to be cutting carbon emissions over the next few years? And you've got to say that you're taking measures to do that. If you are, you're still using oil. So the question is whether the oil comes from Saudi Arabia or from another oil producer, or whether it comes from the North Sea. And when you look at Britain's balance of payments position, it's far better for the oil to come from the North Sea than to come from Saudi Arabia.
So you actually think Rosebank maybe, for our own energy security...
I don't think this should be an ideological issue, because you must say that you've got a plan to cut carbon emissions. I think that's the problem that he's got.
Okay, but this is sold on the international market, so it's not actually going to help people. It's not going to help British people. It's not going to bring down their bills. This is going to be sold on the international market. There is no benefit here. The impact, the amount of oil or gas we're talking about is very small in respect to the whole, like the entire market. So even if you were to extract all of this, it's not going to have a real impact for ordinary people. It's just going to create more ecological problems. And those problems will remain where the oil is or the gas is extracted. That's the problem. And you know, you're adding more emissions. Where's the benefit from that? Instead of actually investing in renewables, where you create the jobs there, and you can, hopefully, it would be sold on the domestic market. Then you can set the price. Unfortunately, when it comes to oil and gas, this is all sold on the international market. So when people say we need to extract more oil and gas, we need to frack more because we can then bring down the prices for ordinary people, for British people, it doesn't work like that. Okay, anyway, moving on. I just wanted to bring up that about... he did later mention in the interview about immigration, but I just wanted to focus on that part there.
So here we are at Eagle Pass.
Now, Elon Musk, entrepreneur, it says here, guy who likes to trash companies. First it was Tesla. He was the CEO, the management of Tesla were saying, please stop tweeting stuff. You're damaging the company. And then he bought, of course, Twitter and is trying to run it into the ground. Anyway, he's out now. It seems to be doing political stuff, going to the border between Mexico and the US, the US and Mexico, and I don't know, what is he up to? I think he's perhaps running for political, or he's testing the water for political office, because what else has he left? He has, he's bought companies, he's set up companies, he's sent, rockets into space. What else is there left for him? Well, the last option, of course, is political office. And I think this is what he's gearing up for.
And we're going to be meeting with the major officials.
Many people you'll see are fleeing poverty. I get that.
Sure.
But there are others that are fleeing, incarceration.
Yes. we are basically, it seems like a place where you can go to get away from the law.
Yes.
So, okay, well, I think with that, and I see this sort of just a kind of a group over there that's coming in. So, it's this sort of I don't know if you could really see it. I'll try to switch it around.
What the hell was that supposed to be? I don't know if you can see it looking around. Okay, they're under a bridge and there's some people around them and there's some containers. Okay, I'm not sure what that's about. But I think going to the border, I think he wants to present himself as some sort of candidate for political office. Now, I don't think he can become president. Okay, so don't worry about that, because he doesn't meet the criteria. You have to have been born in the United States. He's South African, I believe. So he wasn't born in the United States. So he can't become president, but he could become a senator. He could become a congressman. or governor. He could become governor of California or governor of Texas or something. I don't know. This is probably what this is my feeling, because why is he getting involved in this aspect of politics, going to the border, talking about the border problem, the immigration problem? This is about looking at a way of getting his finding a way into politics, unfortunately. From politics to crime.
I've spent this morning in Croydon, spending time with local residents, youth workers, community leaders and the police. We've been working incredibly hard, not just in Croydon, but actually around London, supporting young people, giving them constructive things to do, keeping them busy, particularly in the evenings when we know violent crime can go up, weekends and during the holidays. And, you know, my thoughts and prayers are with this young child's family, whose life will never be the same again. But what we can't do is give up on young people. We've got to be investing in them, giving them constructive things to do so they can flourish and thrive. And I'm unwilling to give up on any young person.
Is it right, the perception that knife crime is getting worse in London?
Well, look, I mean, one death is one death too many, and I mean that. I've seen the consequences too often, both as a Member of Parliament and as the Mayor, what happens to a bereaved family. But we're seeing the benefits of our investment. I was speaking to a youth worker today in Croydon, and he shared with me that because of our investment from City Hall and the Violence Reduction Unit, that's giving young people constructive things to do after school, weekends and...
Look, I like Sadiq Khan, but I think he's terrible at doing these interviews. He comes across as somebody who's over-prepared. He doesn't come across as somebody who truly cares. He's different in different forms of interviews, where he's sitting down and he's delivering or he's standing up and he's delivering a speech. He's much better. But the way he comes across here is like, yes, we had this problem, but what we're doing is we're putting in these measures to deal with it. And he comes across, unfortunately, as almost businesslike. And this is not what you want. You need to show more humanity. You need to show more empathy for the victims involved here and their families. And when it comes to knife crime, I don't know what the solution is, but I think it does require more community policing, the community working with police more. But of course, if there are cuts to public services, it makes that more difficult. You need more funding for youth services. Get services as we saw with the guy who was on Question Time last night, who was talking about how cuts to public services, cuts to services for young people have made it more difficult for people in the community to try and reach out to young people who are resorting to this because they have nothing to do. And nothing to do is not really a good excuse, but if you're reducing outlets for young people, young people are stressed, they are under a lot of pressure, there's a lot of requirements put upon them, breakdown in the family, whatever. These are all stresses for young people, and you need to create services. You need to create an outlet, a functional outlet for them. And if you don't, then somebody else will fill that vacuum. Gangs will fill that vacuum. Crime will fill that vacuum. And I think there's also a huge problem with social media, where certain influencers are being presented as role models. And these influencers are, of course, not... they're not really good role models for, like Andrew Tate and people like this. They're negative role models for young people, and this feeds into this problem. Now, of course, there isn't one simple solution to this, but there are a number of factors that need to be looked at, but I think poverty and cuts to public services are the core problem here, and they need to be addressed.
Holidays, they've not seen for almost 2 years. A teenager killed in Croydon. One death is one too many. They've also seen a reduction in relation to young people getting involved in knife crime. So they're seeing some of the early signs of the progress that investment can make. And we're going to carry on from City Hall, with or without government support, investing in young people. At the same time, we're going to invest in the police. We need more police officers, more community support officers, so they can take off our streets the knives and offensive weapons.
Interesting to hear you say with or without government support. The Conservative Minister, Richard Holden, said that you should be focused on bringing down knife crime rather than distractions like the ULEZ. What's your response to that?
Well, I hope he would reflect on his comments. You know, I'm unwilling to use this child's death, her brutal killing, as a political football. I'm quite clear, though, since 2016, I've been making clear both the consequences of austerity, but also investing in both our police,
I mean, I
but
guess
also
in
young
his
people as
defence,
well.
he would say that, look, after an event like this, it's natural that people look to politicians' response to it.
Well, absolutely, and that's why I spent a lot of time yesterday with the Commissioner, today in Croydon, speaking to the community, listening to the community. I'm quite clear, my number one priority has got to be keeping our city safe, keeping Londoners safe. That's why I feel so passionate about investing in young people, but also advocating for investment from our government, investment in our police and our community support officers.
Okay, but I think it's still not breaking through. Let me read some more of your comments, guys. Replacing the knives with guns, then the gangs will kill each other. Yes. In short, Max, the devil makes work for idle hands. And I don't want to blame the public here. I don't want to blame young people because in the past, there were services available and we saw less incidents of crimes like this. Well, if you see that, if you take these services away, if you break the link between the police and the community, where you create a situation where the community is less willing to engage with the police, and the rhetoric from the Tories when it comes to policing is they need to be tougher. Like you see the criticism Suella Braverman had for police officers dancing at the Pride marches. But she should be encouraging that because that's them working with the community. Would she prefer to see police officers cracking people's heads open or engaging with them, dancing with them? Like the right wing look at that and say this is a problem instead of this is something that should be encouraged. Meeting with the public, dancing with the public, enjoying. They're there to maintain public safety, of course, to make sure that people who are troublemakers are taken out of the way, like are removed from the situation, or that if a situation becomes tense, it's de-escalated. That's what you want. It's not about punishing people. It's not about cracking skulls. It's about creating a situation where the public feel comfortable. Also, the public feel comfortable speaking to the police if there's an issue about crime or whatever. You don't want a situation where people are afraid to speak to the police or feel that they would be grassing up, snitching on people if they do report things to the police. That's not what you want. I take you don't cook, Hugh. That's about when the police in New York wanted to stop knife crime. Where did they seek help? Glasgow. They visited and looked at how to change things for the better. It worked. Well said, Gordon. Looking at how other police forces do things, looking at how crime has been reduced in other parts of the world, I think, no country is perfect. Some countries have, do things better than others and do things worse than others. And that's why I think it's always important, be it, for example, regarding crime, regarding healthcare, regarding any social issue, technology, how to invest in, infrastructure, improving public transport. Look at how other countries do it, and if you can see they're doing it well, try and emulate that. Of course, it doesn't always work, but you have to try. But meet the people in those countries, understand what was the transition, what did they do to improve things, how can we emulate that? And in many countries, many cities, they'd be happy to share this information because it promotes their city. Look, as you said there, Gareth, it's sorry, it wasn't Gordon. It was, this is great for Glasgow. Glasgow are saying, look, we helped New York reduce its crime rate. This is wonderful news. This is something you can use to promote your city. It's about working together. Nobody does it perfectly. Some people do it better than others. Sometimes we can emulate it and sometimes not. So on that, I want to say thank you so much to everyone who came on. Thank you so much for the super chats and your support. We're almost at the end of the stream for tonight, so I just want to say thank you once again to everyone who came on, and thanks to the moderators for doing a wonderful job. The Irish police had to escort some politicians returning to the Parliament from summer recess because there was an angry mob waiting for them. A big problem for the Irish politicians is that they're seen as completely disconnected from the problems ordinary people face. The Irish politicians earn a lot more than many politicians around Europe. They're protected from the cost of living crisis. Many of them are landlords, so they have vested interest in maintaining the status quo when it comes to the housing problem, and they seem disconnected, of course, and they're not, and disinterested in the problems ordinary people face. And of course, this makes people angry. So thanks once again to everyone who came on. We have our one for the road, so I hope you enjoy this. I'm sure you will.
So, Minister, you've announced the slogan for your upcoming party conference. That's right, long-term solutions for a brighter future. Do those solutions include drilling for oil west of Shetland? Brighter can, of course, mean on fire. Right. The key thing to remember is that we are not afraid to make long-term, difficult decisions. So what about HS2? Are you going to commit to extending it to Manchester? I'm not going to speculate on future decisions, but you just said that you weren't afraid to take long-term, difficult decisions. Yes, in the long term, not the short term. Sorry? In the long term, we'll make lots of long-term, difficult decisions. In the short term, not so much. When you say the long term, what do you mean? Well, after the party conference, certainly. So you're not going to take any long-term decisions that might cause you short-term difficulty. Exactly. But don't all long-term decisions worth taking have short-term challenges? Of course, we just want to make sure that we don't have to deal with them. So, are you going to extend HS2 or not? Look, governments are always looking at projects in terms of value for money and how much of that value can go to our friends. What? But the point is that people in the north don't care about a train to London. You should hear what they say about the place. They can be quite rude. Okay, but no, northern people love their cars, which is why we've invested literally hundreds of pounds in fixing potholes. But what about HS2? Did you hear what I said about potholes? Yes? Well then, they're holes in the road, apparently. Sometimes I can even see them from my chopper. But HS2? Why do you keep going on about trains? Are you some sort of obsessive? You're the Minister for Transport. For now, who knows what I'll be up to in a couple of months. I hope it involves tanks. Whilst I have you, can I just ask your opinion on the goings-on at GB News? Look, some of my most online friends are big fans of GB News, but I wouldn't choose to appear on it myself. I thought you hosted a weekly show. I mean, yes, but I'm not really there when I do it. Do you present it from home? No, I'm just always thinking about something else. Thank you, Minister. Next up, as Boris Johnson is given permission to build a pool at his Oxfordshire home, we ask, what would you like to see have a swim with the former Prime Minister? A shark, a tiger, or a massive toaster?
Maybe the toaster. So guys, once again, thank you so much for everyone who's coming on. Thank you so much for your support. Thanks to the moderators for doing a wonderful job. I'll see you on Tuesday, same bad time, same bad channel. Have a great weekend. See you soon. Take care. Good night.